So I will call to order at 5:02. And then I'm going to ask everybody to re-practice their virtual Pledge of Allegiance skills, if they could. So if you could unmute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I know that's not always the easiest, so I appreciate everybody participating there. Okay, we're going to go right on to item C on our agenda, which is public comment. Obviously, we are fully virtual this evening. So just as a quick overview, as you see on the screen in front of us, if you are logged in with us, if you are interested in providing public comment, please raise your hand. And then Devin will unmute you and acknowledge your presence in the queue for public comment, and then you'll be allowed to speak at that time. So right now I will open it up for public comment.
Give it a few more seconds, but seeing no hands.
Okay.
I think we're all set.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Devin. Appreciate it. We are going to move right on to minutes. So may I get a motion to approve the attached December 15th, 2021 minutes?
This is Wendy. Motion to approve.
In a second.
Second.
Who was that, Chris?
I'll second, Meg. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I am going to offer abstentions tonight. We'll talk about that because we have, obviously you can always abstain from a vote, but I want to make sure I call that out since we do have some new board members with us this evening. So any abstentions? I don't think that was anything. Was that just feedback? I couldn't tell. Everybody's good? Awesome. All right, so we are unanimously approved on minutes. Next order of business is correspondence. So at this point, we would have any correspondence represented that was received between 12/14/2021 and 1/14/2022. We have none for our review, but I will always take the opportunity now to remind our community members that we do have a contact form on the homepage of our website. It's the very bottom of our website. If you scroll all the way down, please take the opportunity to use that contact form to ask us questions or provide comment if for some reason you cannot attend a meeting with us and provide comment during the public comment portion of the meeting. That is always available to you. It's really a great way for you to contact us, and it gives us an opportunity to really kind of look through your question, respond thoughtfully, and make sure that you have the complete answer that you're looking for. So always know that that's a resource that's available to you. Okay, so we're going to move right on to item F, which is reports. First item is chair report. So I'm actually going to take this time to do some introductions. So we have made some adjustments in this new year. We did make mention of them at our last meeting in 2021, but we've had some new appointments due to some changes, people leaving their liaison positions, as well as a resident change as well. So we do have, I'm going to first start out with some changes in just a type of role within our committee. So very first, you will see Johnny Carrier obviously is still with us. His role has been adjusted though as a new member of town council. He is leaving that resident designation and moving over as our town council liaison. So really no change there as far as his interaction with the committee and what his obligations are to the committee, but just a change in his designation within the committee. And as well, Chris Fagan follows suit in that as well. We are happy to have obviously both of you still with us on the committee. And so Chris, coming off of town council and that liaison role, will now take a resident role on the committee. So no change to the structure of the committee for those two members, just their role within it. So want to make sure everybody was clear on that. But just as important, I do want to introduce two new members with us tonight, which is very exciting. We have both Suraj and Sarah with us. Suraj is joining us as a resident. So this was since Sharon did roll off the committee last year. So Suraj was appointed by town council to join us. We're very excited to have him. And I'm going to just kind of give you a moment to do an introduction, Suraj, in a second. And we also have Sarah with us, who is our is a Board of Ed representative as well. So taking Ellen's place from 2021. So we do have a full committee. All appointments are made. And we are fully rounded out as far as engagement from a committee perspective. So Suraj, if you just want to say hello quickly to the committee and maybe do, like a 30-second intro, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meg. So hello, everyone. Again, as Meg said, I'm Suraj Kurtakuri. I've been a resident of Farmington for almost 12 years now. So I'm excited to be part of this project. Looking forward to see where I can make a valuable contribution and help in any way. So, I'm happy to be here, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Suraj. Sarah?
Hey, everyone. I'm like Suraj. I'm really excited to be here. I've been on the Board of Ed now for 2 years. I have 2 young children, so we're very excited about this project, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you and getting to know all of you a lot better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. We did some onboarding last night, Suraj, Sarah, and I, and what I did commit, and I did this for not only myself, but the whole committee, is that we kind of pay attention to our language tonight. That I've obviously offered to both of them, if they have questions, by all means. It's probably better, like, do your raise your hand signal rather than, kind of trying to jump in, but please do not hesitate to ask us questions. But all of us kind of think about our language, think about some of our acronyms, things like that. If we can take an opportunity to do a little bit more explanation as we go through the process over our next couple of meetings, I think that would probably be really helpful to Suraj and Sarah as they kind of get up to speed on the process and where we are. So just keep that in mind as we move through the meeting tonight. But we are thrilled to have both of you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your service. And I think, hopefully this is a really great experience as we all, as a committee, have experienced to date. I think we will continue to do so. So thank you very much. Next item of business is Town Council Liaison. So Beth, anything in particular to add?
I think that would be Johnny at this point.
I think
Town
so.
Council. I'm sorry, I jumped to Board of Ed. Sorry, I'm getting myself all confused. Town Council, go,
You
Johnny.
guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we've had a couple of meetings, but last night the town council voted to appoint a ad hoc committee to look at a 10,000-foot view of the 1928 building, which would consist of myself, Edward Gianeros, and a couple of staff members, just looking at, like I said, a 10,000-foot view, space needs for the town, how to engage the public on their input, that kind of thing, to eventually appoint a committee that would take on the 1928 building. Part of that charge we will be asking the building committee for a timeline of when decisions will need to be made so that it does not affect the building of this of the high school and the grounds, and at what point do we need to have everything in place. So that's coming up in the next few weeks.
Great, thank you, Johnny. Any questions around that? Obviously more to come. We have always committed to work closely, although the 1928 building committee and the work there is a separate project and initiative independent of the work we're doing. We've always committed to work closely with that committee and make sure that we're all aligned. So any other questions for Johnny on that? Okay, now Beth, sorry. I got my committees and boards confused. Anything from Board of Education?
Not as it pertains to the building committee. I really, we'll be getting into budget season. That's our big news for this time frame for this point of the year, but that's about it.
Great. Any questions for Beth? All right, we'll move right on to owner's representative report. Mark, Chris.
Hi, sure. So just quickly, we are continuing to work on our third-party contracts, wrapping up the contract with O&G hopefully shortly, and the selection of the commissioning agent and professional engineer for third-party plan reviewing. We did have the professional team had an informal meeting with the state the other day to sort of talk about the delineation of plan lines, project lines on the plans and specs. And so, we had a good meeting with them to kind of talk through that process. And that's really the only update on the owner's rep side.
Any questions for Mark? All right, we will move right on to the architect report. Richard?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I guess I have 6 items I want to talk about very briefly. And I guess a 7th one also, because now that Johnny is on the ball on this 1928 building project, I have a 7th comment I want to make. The first we received from the Institute for Human-Centered Design last week comments on our progress design development set of plans that we forwarded to them. It was a thorough review. What we would like to do now is circulate their comments with the design team because it has an impact on electrical as well as mechanical, as well as food service equipment. So we will circulate it, we will get responses, and then we will share the comments and responses at the building committee's next meeting. Today we had a very good security task force meeting. This was the 2nd meeting with this group. We will have a 3rd security meeting when we get into construction documents. The focus of today's meeting was to review the checklist that we had prepared, and as we looked at specific details, in particular the Sally Port, the secure entrance into the school, and there was quite a bit of discussion about the details pertaining to that. We'll talk about that more when we do a design development presentation to this committee at the completion of design development. The 3rd item is we had a very good meeting with Bob Selmer. My objective in that meeting was to make sure that we could prepare plans and specs for both projects. The committee remembers that there are 2 projects here. I wanted to make sure that we could prepare one set of plans and specifications for both projects, and it appears that Bob Selmer is in agreement with that strategy. We would like to schedule, the 4th item is we would like to schedule a meeting with your town planner to have a preliminary discussion for the application for site plan approval. Remember that we're going to be submitting for site plan approval to the full Planning and Zoning Commission. Our target is end of February, I believe February 23rd is our target. So we would like to have a preliminary discussion with the town planner to make sure that the plans and details that they'll be looking for are consistent with what his or her objectives are. So we're gonna, next week we'll be scheduling that meeting. I do have some responses to public comments that we received on the value engineering list. The value engineering list, which was included in the committee's packet, was made available to the public, and there were 3 comments that were made by the public, and I appreciate the comments and the thoughts that were brought into those comments. And there were also links to videos that illuminated some subjects that were cited. So the first comment had to do is the value engineering item D12 on the VE list, and that pertains to having individual neutralization systems for the science room use of chemicals rather than a central one. It's more economical to do it locally. However, the opinion by the public was that a centralized one may be less expensive and easier to maintain. However, it is our belief that the kinds of chemicals and the quantity of those chemicals really does not warrant a larger centralized neutralization system. So we'll continue to look at that, but I think that our strategy is the most efficient way to do it. The second comment from the public had to do with the use or the elimination, I should say, of a vapor barrier at the roof just before the roof insulation. We believe that the metal roof deck, which is at the roof, acts as a vapor barrier itself. Adding another vapor barrier, we believe, is redundant and not necessary, particularly when you consider that there's very low levels of humidity in public schools, except for locker areas. So the locker areas for this school are located on the ground floor, which are far removed from the roof. We think that there's no impact from the locker room humidities on this issue. And so for value purposes, we would like to continue with the recommendation on the value engineering list that we eliminate the vapor barrier that was indicated. I believe it's item B2 on the VE list. And the last item from the comment was reconsider the use of our recommendation to use bat insulation instead of spray foam insulation. The comment is that bat insulation loses its insulation value over time. I think it's a good comment. We'll continue to evaluate that as we get into construction documents. But for the record, I did want to say that we did receive the comments and we did hopefully adequately respond to them. So that was the, I guess, I lost track. I think that was the fifth item on my list. The sixth item has to do with the value engineering list. We're prepared to discuss that. We have a new item on that list, which we did present to the working group. That had to do with the retaining wall elimination at the baseball field, or the ball field, I should say. The new item, as of tonight, the seventh item that I want to comment on, specifically to Johnny Carrier, is establishing what the limit of our project is versus the 1928 building. So the design team has talked about this internally. I mean, one strategy is the limit of the project separation should be at the face of the 1928 building so that we could do all of the site work up to the 1928 building and stop at that point. An alternative strategy is to be maybe 10 feet away from the 1928 building, but I think that will leave an incomplete site around that building. And I think I'm not sure what the timetable is for the 1928 building improvements, should they occur, but if those improvements follow the high school project, we would like to make sure that the site work around the 1928 building is finished. So unless we hear otherwise, Johnny, I think we're going to use the face of the 1928 building as the dividing line between the high school project and the 1928 building. That's the end of my report tonight.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Johnny, do you want to follow up? Or are you good?
No, just to say that I fully understand the concept, and this will be one of the issues that I'll bring to the ad hoc committee on our first meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. And just in the interest of, again, of our two new members, one of the things I think maybe that I don't think I clarified last night and want to make sure I do. Richard, you mentioned rightfully so about that we manage this as two separate projects. So I want to make sure that our two new committee members understand when we say that, we're saying the central office / field house locker rooms is one project. And then the new high school building in its entirety is our second project. So we're saying that because from a state perspective and from a financial tracking perspective, we have two separate project numbers, and you'll see that how we kind of tactically move between those two projects. You'll see us approve different invoices under different projects, those kind of things. So just wanted to make sure you guys were aware when we say two projects, it's really, that's the distinction between the two.
I think just one clarification, Meg, if I may.
Yep.
That the field house is now incorporated into
that's right, sorry.
into the high school project.
Yes.
So it's really the Farmington High School project. The difference is there's two different buildings. So for our new members, the 900 wing is an existing wing of the building that will be the only wing that remains, well, depending on what happens with the 1928 building, that's incorporated. It's the only portion of the existing building that becomes a part of the new project. Portion of that has an existing field house in it, which the state has required that we incorporate that into the high school project, and that the delineation of the central offices, which takes up the rest of that 900 wing, which currently now is all classrooms, become what's encompassed in the second project number.
Thanks, Mark. No, I appreciate that clarification. And we had to make some of those adjustments to the project, so thank you. All right, anything else for Richard or any other questions or thoughts? All right, then we're going to move right on to the construction manager report. Are you up first, Laurel?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak if I may. Again, O&G has been participating in all of the meetings that have been taking place, as well as finalizing any of the value engineering costs, updating those costs as required. And if I may share my screen to just kind of show the schedule, an update of the schedule. So let's see if you can.
You should be all set.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Everybody able to see my, I'm going to blow it up, make it bigger, but you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
We can.
Yes, Laurel.
Okay. All right. So we have our pre-construction schedule update as of January 17th. And as I had mentioned at our last meeting, I will be providing updates to these on a monthly basis. So it'll probably be the second meeting of every month. And what I'll do is I'll kind of highlight where we've been, where we're going, so that we can just talk about those items and what the updates are. So just kind of going down the schedule that I've already shared with everyone. The CM contract approval, I kind of bumped that off to February, not knowing when that was going to end. It's still been lagging. So just keeping track of that. As mentioned before, the commissioning agent, that's being presented tonight. So I'm showing that we're approving it tonight, but who knows? The professional engineering services contract has been approved. And you will see, as Mark had mentioned from CSG, we've got more contracts, that will be worked on. So the next one will be the peer review contract, followed by a local review contract. So those are the next contracts that'll be up that you as a building committee will be starting to see over the upcoming time frame. Again, this is just pretty much reflecting through the beginning of February. So just to let you know what's up and coming for tasks. On the next page, so the SD presentation, I mean, since it is on the agenda, I'm still kind of carrying this SD presentation forward. In the meantime, Tai-Soo Kim has proceeded on with design development. So that's a very critical time frame here. This end of February, they need to stop drawing, and then we need to start doing our next estimate. So that's something that's very critical to stay on target with where we are. And I forgot to mention at the very beginning, we are still on schedule, but we are coming up to some critical time frames. Also that we had kept track of, and something we're going to start following up with the town, is an offsite traffic study that the town will be conducting. So we want to start tracking that as well, because that will affect OSTA, our OSTA submission. So we want to start tracking that. Let's see what else is up and coming. Let's see, we had mentioned with Bob Selmer when we were looking to see him next with these PCR meetings, DDR meetings, so they know that we're going to be going up there sometime in April. Kind of sort of coming up soon is our, applications for DEP. I don't know if we need flood management, but for the stormwater, so those are things that we'll start to track. For zoning board and appeals, that did get approved. Let's see, what happened with that? That was on the 13th. There was a hearing and a decision was made on there, and we just need Kat's office to verify that she's received formal notice of the decision. So we've made it to, go ahead.
I have received formal notice.
Perfect. So that's good. So that's behind us. Let's see what else we got. As Richard had mentioned, getting ready to prepare this site plan special permit, and he is the 23rd. I have the 25th. It's somewhere in that time frame, but that's our next up because that's about a month away, and that also is critical for our timeline. So making sure that we stay on for that, and this is very, very critical, as Richard had mentioned, that get a hold of the town planner and figure out what those requirements are so we stay ahead of that. So that is underway. And what else is coming up? I think that's about it. Oh, one more thing that I kind of breezed over because there's nothing after bidding and award. Back on construction documents, and we're going to be talking about this tonight as well, is the enabling phase and what we need to do. So just a heads up, about a month from now, Taisu Kim needs to be able to start working on construction documents, and there's work to be done before they can start that. So tonight we'll be talking about this enabling work and if that's going to proceed. Again, but this is, if we're going to be doing that this summer, we need to get started with those construction documents. So again, just to reiterate, we're still on schedule and we're monitoring these activities. And I'm pretty much done with my report.
Just a quick thing, Laurel, from me. So just clarification for, again, new members, when Laura mentioned the CM contract is still kind of out there and we're finalizing, that is the contract with O&G. So we are executing on it, we're moving, we just have to make some minor modifications, just so you're clear on that. And Laura, can you tell us, what OSTA is?
Office of State Traffic Administration, I believe. They are a state agency that is notorious at this point of, holding things up. So, we know that it's a critical item. It is on the checklist with OSCGNR, that's Bob Selmer's office. It is a checklist. It's required for bidding, awarding of contracts and all that. So it's just one of those reviews, check boxes that we need to keep track of.
Right, the state reviews the traffic. There's a traffic study that's done, identifies cars in and out. If the project will impact more traffic. So for example, in this case, we don't anticipate, because the number of parking spaces or individuals that will be attending the school or staff are in that whole area isn't growing to grow to a number that we expect would ultimately, affect a new traffic on state highway work. So so we hope that that's a smooth process with the state. For example, if they were to build a new shopping mall right there that was going to impact or offices or something, new residential community that was going to impact the number of cars going back and forth, then I think we would have a bigger concern. But Laurel is correct in that it is a process and it does take time. So we want to get in and out of that process as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions for Laurel on schedule?
And please let me know if I went through it too fast, because I'll just slow down next time. I was trying to keep everybody interested.
All right, great. Anything else, Jeff? Anything you need to add for within the CM report? Are you good?
No, I'm good, Nick. Thanks.
All right, perfect. All right, excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to our final reports here. So next is F7, which is Communications Subcommittee report. Kat, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. So the communications subcommittee met just before this meeting. We worked with IRA to kind of finalize our outreach plan moving forward. We had talked about earlier doing some Zoom public meetings, just an opportunity to check in with the public, let them know what the progress of the project is at various checkpoints. So we are planning for a Zoom public outreach meeting in February and another one in May. We think the February one will be more about the process, where we are, what we've done since the referendum has passed, and the additional checkpoints we need to get through in order to break ground. And then the May one will be a little bit more when we have final designs. We're talking about the site plan changes that will be occurring, and kind of presenting those to the public at that time, and offering an opportunity for Q&A. Those will be aligned with additional newsletters to go out to spread the word about again, the progress, a Q&A section, and then inform them of these upcoming meetings. So that's really our plan for the next probably 6 months to do that outreach to the public.
Thank you, Kat. Any questions for Kat on communications? All right. I don't think we have anything additional for professional partnership for this meeting, do we, Kat?
We do not.
Excellent. So we will move right on to our final report, which is the financial report.
So financial report, there are no updates in the expenditure one that we give out. So I haven't created a new one because we haven't spent any money. We do have an updated invoice tracking spreadsheet, which is just reflected by the invoices that are on the agenda to approve tonight. So these will be included with the minutes, just are updated based on the tracking of approvals.
And this is where I mentioned, if you look at the bottom, there's 2 tabs, central office and new FHS. So those are the 2 projects and how we track them. Any questions for Kat on the financial report? All right, great. All right, we're going to move right into new business then. We do have some invoices to approve. So we're going to start right out here. So could I get a motion to approve the attached invoice from TSKP Studio in the amount of $292,800?
So moved. Johnny Carrier.
Second, Wendy.
Chris.
We'll give it to Chris this time.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get next time.
Yeah.
All right. Just for discussion, this invoice is for professional design services rendered regarding the Farmington High School project through December 2021. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstention?
I'll abstain.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, and the motion carries. All right, we'll move on to our next item is to approve the attached invoice for TSKP Studio in the amount of $12,200.
So moved. Johnny Carrier.
Wendy, you want to take this second?
I'll second it.
All right, for discussion, this invoice is for professional design services rendered during the renovation for the 900 wing through December 2021. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain again.
All right, Sarah, thank you. All right, motion carries. We're going to move right on to our next item. So to approve the attached invoice from Construction Solutions Group in the amount of $22,597.
So moved. Johnny Carrier.
I'll second, Wendy Koo.
Okay, for discussion, this invoice is for professional services rendered regarding the Farmington High School project through December 2021. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you. Motion carries. We will go to item G4 to approve the attached invoice. Could I get a motion to approve the attached invoice from Construction Solutions Group in the amount of $1,030?
So moved, Johnny Carrier.
Second, Wendy Koo.
All right, for discussion, this invoice is for professional services rendered regarding the renovation of the 900 wing through December 2021. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Item G5, could I get a motion to accept the oh no, that's it, sorry. We're done, right? That's everything, or did I miss one?
That's all the invoices. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I keep forgetting to group them together like Michael suggested. So next time it'll be easier.
We talked about it kind of being one consent, and then you could call out during discussion if there was one you had questions on, so we're working towards that.
Next time, I promise.
I know, exactly. So we're moving right, I don't know why I don't have the back of my agenda for some reason, Kat. We're on G5, correct?
Correct.
Could I get a motion, the motion on the table, hopefully, is to accept the updated cost estimate and approve the updated VE list. So could I get a motion for that, please?
So moved, Johnny Carrier.
Seconded, Michael Smith.
Okay, so I'm going to open this up for discussion. So just a reminder on this, and Devin, can we go to that kind of update slide? I think it was in the beginning, maybe, of the agenda packet, the one with the process.
It should be in the minutes, Devin, for that up a little bit further that we presented last time, Meg, that one you're talking about?
Yeah, just briefly, just to make sure we're all clear. It's been a while since we discussed VE, so I just want to make sure everybody's clear and know what we're doing and just kind of give a bit of an update. Yeah, there we go. So this was just an overview. We went through on project cost estimation reconciliation. So this is a very first attempt and exercise around VE discussions. So we did go through this very briefly last time just to kind of level set everybody and provide context about the process. And we reviewed, sorry about that, we reviewed the list. So if we remember, what we were really looking for is, that pre-referendum number that we posted was $115,600,000 was that pre-referendum dollar number based on the 5:20 p.m. estimate. When we re-estimated as of 12/1/2021, we ended up at $124,975,000. So we kind of went through, how did we get from that pre-referendum estimate over to that 12/1 estimate? We talked about cost escalation and further delineation of site scope work that brought us there. And then we discussed, based on that, how do we get from that 12/1 estimate of 124 million to our target of 115 million. So what we went through last time, if you remember, was a VE reconciliation list, and we're actually going to go through it again tonight. But really talking about how do we actually get back to that target budget number. So just in note of this, as we move in, I'm gonna send this over to our professional partners to help us guide us through this conversation. But just a note that this VE list, if you remember last time, I should start it out this way. If you remember last time when we left the meeting, we said we're going to put a Google Doc out there and collect comments on the VE items. We received actually quite a few comments that caused the working group to go back and take a look at the VE items. So the list we're going to look at tonight is in response to some of those questions. So as we walk through tonight, don't be surprised as you might see some of the items. You might have noticed them when you looked at them already through the VE list that are different And our numbers are going to look a little different, but we're going to walk through that. But that was the cause. That's why our numbers look a little different, is we are directly responding to comments from building committee members on questions within the VE items we presented previously. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so why don't we walk, who's going to walk us through the VE list this evening?
What I could do, Meg, is I could start on just the kind of the how it was set up and
Yep.
you know what the columns mean to the group here, especially with a couple of new members here. And then Richard, I don't know if you want to go through each of the items that and talk in more detail about the actual VE item itself, if that works.
I could maybe jump to the newer ones first. And then we could jump to the individual line items, because there's quite a few items here, and I don't know if we need to revisit each and every item or if we just want to highlight the newer ones first.
I think that's a good approach.
Okay.
Richard.
All right. So basically, in general, here is that we've completed our SD estimate back in late November, early December. And based on what Meg had shown us before, we were roughly $9.8 million over the original budget, which was not really too alarming at this stage of the project at the SD step or stage. So as we looked at ways of reducing the overall project cost, we developed this VE list, and we went through a number of items that were either recommended by O&G, by the construction manager, by the architect, or by the town or building committee members, added to this list, and then went through and actually estimated the cost for each of these items. We then looked at and kind of discussed each item in a little bit more detail during the working groups and assigned it to one of four categories. Either an alternate, which you see here in blue, the blue column, the light green column, which was approved, meaning it was approved by the working group, but not necessarily by the building committee. So that's what we want to do tonight. We have another column adjacent to that was the pending column. And that's something that we still want to leave on the table. We may want to discuss it a little bit further as the project develops. And then the fourth column is the rejected items, where we either got feedback from the Board of Education, from the school administration, or from the town that said, no, this is not a good idea. Let's track it, but at this point we're gonna reject that VE item. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the report, we total up the columns, and we really were looking at this point really the alternates and the approved column. And by taking the total of those two columns, we were able to reduce the overall project cost by roughly $9.4 million, which actually gets us below the original project budget of the $115,600,000. So, and that's contingent upon approving everything that we have in the alternate and the approved columns. One thing I do want to point out is the items that end up showing in the approved columns are at that point approved. TSKP Studios will take that out of the documents, and when we do the next estimate, our DD estimate, those VE items will no longer be part of the documents. Anything that shows up in the light blue column, the alternate column, will still remain on the documents, but they will be highlighted or clouded in some fashion and labeled as an alternate, so that they will progress through the design phase. And at bid time, we will put those on the drawings, we'll put them out to bid, we'll get numbers for each of those items. And if the bid results come in favorably, we could look down that list of alternates and select items we want to add back into the project. So the items that you'll see in the alternate column will remain on this sheet, and they'll remain through the actually to the next round of estimating when we do our DD estimate, but they will remain part of the project. So with that said, if there's any questions, you could fire them back, but if not, we could start to look at some of the new VE items that came up, that we came up with since the last time we presented this list to the building committee.
Okay, I guess that's my turn. Thanks very much, Mark. So I think for the benefit of the new members of this committee, as well as a reminder to the old members of this committee, that there's been a lot of work done in trying to get the cost back down to where we need to be to meet the number that was approved by the public. The 115,600,000, that was approved by the public. And that was before, a lot of escalation that's been occurring. I mean, you've heard a lot of things in the news, I'm sure, about the cost of escalation. Inflation is rising. The availability of material, especially if material is coming from overseas, backlogs. We have other projects that are under construction, and there have been reported shortages for steel, for example, as well as other material. So those were the factors that contributed toward increasing the cost or the estimate from 115.6 million to the 124 million, $475,928, which is what was reported by ONG in December. And so our task, along with ONG and a select group of people who work very diligently from this committee, but also representatives of the town. We had engineering and we had Farmington Public Schools representatives, to come up with its recommendation, how to get back on target. So this list is that working group's recommendation. Ultimately, this full building committee needs to endorse their recommendations or reject it. And so that's why we're here tonight. We need action on the part of this full committee to accept these recommendations or modify them. Once again, if you look at the bottom line, if you look at the very bottom line, you'll see a number that looks familiar to you, $124,475,928. That working group recommended certain reductions. For those reductions, if you look at the green column, the bottom line in that green column of recommended reductions is $7,127,027. So we would subtract that from the 124. And then there are some alternates. As Mark pointed out, if bidding is favorable, you can buy all the alternates. And we've had that kind of experience recently on a project. But it's prudent to build into the design some alternates so that you get pricing on bid day for those items. If bidding is not favorable, then you can't afford to buy all those alternates. You'll need to make some wise choices in that list. So we're going to incorporate all of these alternates into the design, and we'll highlight them so that bidders know we're looking for a separate price for those alternates. So then the full committee can make a choice about whether or not to buy them after bid date. That total in the alternates column, that's the blue column, that total is $2,235,793. So that should also be subtracted from that total of 124. If we do that, then we are on target. I'm going to bring up a couple of new items that were brought up during the working group session that were not previously discussed with this committee. So you'll see if you look at this list that there are items in red font. Those are the new items. So if we could scroll up, sorry, not screw up, scroll up. The screw ups will come later. Let's scroll up to the top of the sheet and look at the red font. The first item in red font is C1A, which has to do with the floor finish in the public areas, in the corridors, the cafeteria, the lobbies, etc. This went back and forth for a while, and the final outcome of this decision, which is whether or not to use porcelain tile or additional porcelain tile in the public areas versus vinyl composition tile, VCT, or some other less expensive material that still needs to be explored. That was accepted by the working group, or recommended by the working group, to continue as an add alternate. So if pricing is favorable, you can get the porcelain tile finish on all of the public spaces. The next item that is in red font is item C13. This item is to reduce the number of operable partitions between classrooms. Your educational specifications that were approved by the Board of Ed indicated a total of 6 operable partitions between classrooms. This item was a recommendation to reduce that number to 4. And after a lot of deliberation, back and forth discussion, that option was rejected. That's why it's in the orange column. And that means that we are doing the 6 in the design as recommended or as specified by the Board of Ed. We're not making any reduction in the number of operable partitions. The next item is item number D11. This was an alternative material for piping instead of using copper for cold water and hot water piping. Instead of using copper, we can go to plastic, which is less expensive. And again, in the end, I think Sam Kilpatrick prevailed and said there's no way we could, for that kind of savings, there's only a savings of $20,000, for heaven's sakes. We should reject that option. So that was rejected by the working group. The next item, which is a big item, is item G4A. The value of that option is $712,000. So let me explain what this is. This is a newer item that we brought at a more recent working group session. Right now, the way the site is laid out, we have a new ball field that's going to be placed on the footprint of the existing building. Once the existing building is demolished, we're going to be putting a new ball field to replace the ball field that is going to be removed. That's currently not too far from the football field. And we're also going to be installing new tennis courts. But because of the way the building and the site is configured, and in particular because of the way the 1928 building, if it remains, impacts the site, we have to build a retaining wall along that very steep slope that's behind the existing building. That steep slope, if you get to the top of the slope, you'll come to the upper soccer fields, the upper play fields. So in order to put that ball field there, we need to insert a retaining wall. But the actual working of that site is going to have a huge impact on that slope and the trees that are on that slope. In fact, according to O&G's estimate, we would have to go halfway up the slope in order to insert that retaining wall. And it just became kind of obvious to us because we looked at a number of alternatives to try to reduce that retaining wall. It's a very expensive wall. We looked at rotating the ball field. We looked at trying to shift the ball field. It just was not possible to eliminate that retaining wall at all, unless, and this idea came from our landscape architect and site engineers, look, why don't we rework that entire slope all the way to the top in the area where it impacts the ball field. And instead of putting in a retaining wall, we make that slope more gradual, and consequently, we would not need a retaining wall. But that would mean we would rework that slope. That would also mean we would remove the trees in that portion of the slope, only in that portion of the slope that's adjacent to the ball field. And then once the new bank is established, replant that area, and eventually it would become what it is today. But that could save $712,000. And then if I could paraphrase the working group, that's a no-brainer. It seems like it does not affect the program, it does not affect the functions of those areas, and in the end, you'll end up with a ball field, and we will have spent less money to make that transition. So that's why that's in the approved column as recommended by the working group. The last item in red font is item G15. And this is still subject to refinement during the completion of our design development drawings, which we'll complete it at the end of February. There's a potential savings of $200,000 if we can take some of the earthwork that exists on the site and rather than trucking it off the site, actually incorporate it into the site. And in particular, in the areas under the ball field, under the future tennis courts, and even under the footprint of the building. So that topography is being refined right now by site engineers. We won't know until the end of design development whether we can achieve that kind of savings of 200,000. That's why it's still in the pending column. So stay tuned until the completion of design development before you take action on this. But I think you can see that if you were to accept all of the recommendations made by the working group, we could get below where we need to go. Mark, am I representing that correctly?
Yes, Richard.
All right, thank you, Richard and Mark, both for review and update. I want to open it up to now for the building committee. Any questions or thoughts, additional clarification? As we said, Richard kind of went over highlighted the changes, the delta between the last time you saw the list and seeing it and seeing this list now that we're going to talk about approval for. But any other questions that weren't captured previously? Anything else? I just want to make sure we have a good dialogue around this. Anything, basically anything you need to know or questions answered before we put this up for vote. Oh, Russ has got his hand up. You should be able to unmute, Russ, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, am I good? You hear me?
Yep, yep.
With that cost of the reduction for the 712,000 for the retaining wall, he's mentioned how much slope and earthwork there's going to be. Is that included with that 712,000 and the tree removal and all the replanting and whatever you're planning on doing now?
That question really should be answered by Mark. We did review that a layout that actually was done by our site engineers and presented to ONG for costing. So Mark or Laurel, can you respond?
Yeah, yes, Russ. That's a net change, meaning that it includes, you know, everything that needs to go back in its place after the slope is cut back. Richard, I think I don't believe we're planting trees on that. I thought that was like an upland seed mix that was going on that slope.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, but yes, Russ, that's kind of an all-in number there for making all those changes. So,
and now just for my own clarification, I mean, I don't mean to bore the group with it, but you're saying just where the retaining wall was going. I think once you get into this slope, you're going to be into it, and I don't know how you're going to just stop and kind of regrade that slope without pretty much doing that whole embankment.
We don't.
Or am I missing something? I know, Richard, I guess I'm talking to Mark on it, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Russ, I believe we extend the reworking of that slope extends beyond what the original layout of the retaining wall was, if I'm not mistaken. I think it does extend further. You know, Richard's office, yeah, they did provide us a sketch on you know, our preliminary grading plan for that area that our site guys took a look at and priced up. So.
All right, sounds good. I just was going on. It was only, somebody stated it was only for where the retaining wall was. I just didn't know how you would just stop the limits of that work at the retaining wall.
Yeah. No, I think it changes that whole grading plan behind, you know, between the ball field and that slope. So.
Yeah, that's going to be a big part of the project. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or points of clarification?
This is Wendy. I guess just, can you refresh my memory about what we're doing with pending? With the pending category, like you have 2 items on there. One's deferring the culinary arts equipment, and then the other one that was in the red was the solar. Like,
No action was taken on the pending items. In other words, we haven't reduced the culinary. We're still maintaining it. So that's still to be revisited. We need to do a little bit more work about to see if even we can reuse existing equipment. So no action was taken.
okay. And then I guess on that note, I did see, and of course, I think you guys know I'm going to ask about the culinary arts program. But I saw that you guys had made the decision to eliminate the culinary arts and turn that into a regular classroom.
No, I think you're referring to so there's a culinary classroom and a culinary lab. So the recommendation was to eliminate the classroom because the classroom instruction could happen in another classroom, but we were not eliminating the lab. I think that's what.
Okay, yeah, I think I read that backwards. Okay, so that makes sense.
Right.
All right, so you're keeping the lab and not
creating a dedicated culinary classroom.
okay. All right. Thanks for that clarification.
Meg, I got one more question.
All right. All you. Go ahead, Russ.
Can you go back? Can somebody go back up on the list to where that there's a I guess one more right there to 112 for the eliminate roof screens. With going back and getting a waiver for the variance, was that discussed at all during that waiver process at the Zoning Board of Appeals?
I can answer that question if I may.
Sure.
The only item that we presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals was the height of the building.
Right.
The question of screen and whether or not it's required will be handled by the full Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm sure they're going to want to see, typically they want to see building elevations, they want to see parking layouts, they want to see all kinds of engineering.
Right, I understand that. My whole point is they don't typically just eliminate rooftop screens. So just to put it up, just to let everyone know, like, I think we better, to me, I would plan for that. And if eventually they say we don't have to put them up, would be one thing, but I think we need to be on the safe side and include it.
You're correct, Russ. That's why it's in the pending column. And there's even a note that says that it will be under design review, meaning that will be reviewed by Planning and Zoning. We haven't taken that.
No, I know, but it's not reflected in the cost, right?
It is in the cost.
Yeah.
It has not been subtracted from the cost.
Okay, all right.
Since there's a couple of questions that are related to the pending item, is it fair to state that anything that exists in the pending column, whether it's in black or red, because some of them are black or red, they're all included in the current project costs that we are carrying, and anything that's in that column is part of the project. I think if I'm remembering correct, those are items that we're saying could be explored as potential savings should we need them now or in the future. But to be clear, I think that pending says you're in the project in terms of scope of the project and cost of the project. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you. I'm good there.
Thanks, Russ.
And to further clarify, anything then that's in the rejected column, whether it's black or red, those items too are also in the project in scope and in cost, correct? Okay, thanks.
That's correct.
Great. Any other conversations, thoughts? Makes sense to everybody? Before we
I'd just like to offer a compliment to the folks at ONG and TSKP, the whole team, and Russ too, everybody from the school system. I think in terms of, a VE exercise is never easy, but I thought this was very well organized and appreciated everybody's input and ability to bring good solutions. So a comment, not a question. A job well done, and I imagine an exercise that we will continue to need to repeat throughout the process.
Agreed, Michael. Yeah, this is not the last time we'll be going through this process, but it is good to know that the process makes sense and works. We're always open, I think, on changes, enhancements, things to make this easier. As you said, Michael, I think this went very well for our first run through. So, but we can always modify and adjust as we move forward as well. So, all right, one last call for any questions or anything else before we go ahead and open this up for vote. All right, I will take that as moving forward. So the motion on the table is to accept the updated cost estimate and approve the updated VE list. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
All right. And motion carries. All right, excellent work, team. This is great, big accomplishment for us. Again, the first time that we're doing it. We'll do some more, but we'll always talk more about that process as well, and get everybody prepped and give you the time you need to review anything that's presented in front of you for recommendations as well. So, and as always, if you've got questions after the fact, we can adjust those and answer as well. So. All right, Mark and Richard, you need anything related to that for the VE list, or that's good for us for right now?
Yeah, no, I just want to echo what everyone has said. It's been a good process. I really appreciate ONG's willingness to vet and cost all kinds of ideas. I'm not even going to mention some of the ideas that I brought forward. But in the end, we did not compromise any of the program, with the exception of the culinary classroom portion. So at some point, we're going to have to go back and advise the Board of Education that we have made some adjustments to their ed spec, and that's one of the items that will need to get reconfirmed by the Board of Ed.
Yeah, I think we have some more research we need to do and kind of some thought around that, right, Richard? Like replacement of equipment, what are our options, what do we need? So just some more detail around it in general, I think will help us make those decisions.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Excellent. So we're going to go on to our next agenda item, which is number 6. And this is to discuss the proposal. So at this point, we're not going to make this a motion right now, but it's to discuss the proposal from TSKP Studio for additional services for an early site bid package. So just as we see here on the note for the motion, so TSKP provided the attached proposal that was in your agenda packet for additional services for an early site bid package plus early construction administration. This would be a contract amendment for TSKP to add an early phase to the project as suggested by ONG, and would establish a temporary parking lot, a contractor's access driveway, and site utility work would be completed in the summer of 2022. An early phase would require an additional review by the Office of School Constructions and Grants, an additional round of bidding and support from the design team during construction of the early phase. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today, and what I want to do is just level set a little bit here just to make sure everybody's clear. This should sound familiar. Laurel mentioned this in her scheduling discussion tonight. This is the early enabling package. This is something we've mentioned multiple times, I think, in building committee meetings, is actually pulling the work forward as it's detailed in that note that I just read out earlier in the project. So what I wanted to start with, Devin, if we could pull up that slide, just to give people a little context and some quick hit information to help us guide the conversation here on how we want to move forward on this decision, because it's something that we have to do sooner rather than later. So just as a general point of conversation, and then I'm going to open this back up to Richard and Mark and Laurel as well to provide any additional context that I'm going to miss here to make sure that the building committee has a good understanding of all this information and everything we're going to talk about tonight. But when we're talking about that an early enabling package and moving that work forward, there's a couple of assumptions here that we need to keep in mind. The very first thing, the status of ineligible and eligible items is not impacted by the addition of an early enabling package. So we don't have to worry about having any conversation of, oh, if we do this, what does this mean? What are the impacts? Ineligible, eligible items for reimbursement and all that. That is an assumption that we have on hand. We've talked a lot about having conversations with the state and the scheduling around that. And we see CSG has confirmed the state understands the delay in process and that the receipt of a reimbursement approval letter would not preclude us from holding our meetings with them and presenting the early enabling package as our first phase of construction to go out to bid. So this again is just staying to state standards and process. And we just want to make sure if this is something we move forward on as far as building or bringing this early enabling package forward and approving it, that the state understands what we're trying to do there and the goals, and that shouldn't have any impact on our process with them. And this is important for the building committee to understand. So the costs we're talking about here when we go into estimated cost and benefit would be drawn from contingency. So this is not something that we budgeted out or is included on our current budget. So it would be something we would have to consider as a draw from contingency. So keep that in your back of your mind as we're talking about this. This is an estimated cost that has been provided by our professional partners if we were to move this work early in the process. So TSKP has given us some estimates of kind of design costs that they would consider required. So that site design costs and that site construction admin costs. You'll see some potential additional costs added there because we really don't know if we need this until we go through the process to design and find out what we actually have to do. So those are electrical design costs and electrical construction admin costs. So keep those in mind. We didn't, ONG reported back, they didn't see any additional construction management costs. So the max estimate we'd be looking at here, if all in, if we needed to include those potential additional costs, would be that $106,740. So we, as always, in all our conversations within the building committee, I think it's important for us to take that cost and compare it against the benefit. And if pulling that work early provides these two benefits to us from a project perspective. So we're using summer months to limit the disruption to school operations for construction prep. So we're basically, you heard people say tonight, oh, we'd go out, we'd do work, and then everything would kind of stop for a little bit until we were able to kind of ramp back up. So this would be taking advantage of the time when the kids are not in school to do some of this early enablement work and kind of hopefully not disrupt school operations as much. This was also something ONG brought forward to us, which is, the potential of reducing a portion of the temporary construction costs that will have to be performed on second shift or weekends due to working while school is in session. I think, Mark, you can talk about this a little bit more, or Laura, but it's hard for us to estimate this right now based on the fact that we don't really know some really tight details around this, but something to keep in mind as a benefit associated to us acting upon this early enabling package. And then just a final note before I kind of open this up for discussion and questions to the committee, kind of a known risk. And this is something that's not, of overwhelming concern, but we talked about that approval letter tonight and timing and what's going to happen from the state. It's mentioned up there in the assumptions as well. But it is important to know that the project will proceed at risk until that approval letter is received. Again, not uncommon that this happens, and as soon as that approval letter is received, then the risk then goes away at that point. So it's really a timing thing that we're looking for, that we would manage through, but something to note as part of our conversation. So let me open it up to Mark and Richard and see what else you want to add to the conversation before we start the discussion.
Meg, can I just make one request?
Yeah.
As part of their discussion, do you guys just explain the need for this? As opposed, I understand the need, meaning why you want to do it, but I think we need to at least explain to the committee why it needs to be done and not incorporated as part of the regular project, because it is a change. And to me, I just think a little discussion about why it needs to be done, as opposed to be as an enabling project and not part of the overall project.
You mean the process, Russ? Be clear on why it needs to be packaged
Correct.
differently?
Correct.
Okay, versus the benefit of why would we do it at all?
Right. I
Okay.
think we get it, understand
Yeah.
what the reasoning is.
Yeah.
But why is there an additional cost associated with it if it was all supposed to be part of the work anyway?
Yep.
So as part of that overall discussion and explanation, I think that would be beneficial to the committee.
Russ, I can start, Meg, if you may.
Yep.
And then Mark may follow. So so what's required is that we need to prepare plans and specs that are completely separate from the rest of the project. Those plans and specs, which will be bid early and contracted to subcontractors early, cannot be released for bidding if you are seeking reimbursement. And these, according to our discussions with Bob Selmer, we expect will be reimbursable because it's a function of being required for the project, the main project. We can't go out to bid unless the state approves all the plans and specs. No matter how many phases it's broken down into, each phase has to be standalone plans and specs that are reviewed and approved by the state. That requires an additional round of reviews. It requires an additional commentary that we need to address by the state. It also requires additional construction administration that is tacked on earlier in the project. The way we structured our fee proposal is the construction administration, if we're not required to be there, and this would be our site engineers, if they're not required to be there, if O&G can handle the construction administration requests for information from subcontractors, we don't need to be involved. So that portion of it would be handled as an hourly number. That's why you see that broken out. And electrical, we don't know whether there's going to be a need for temporary electrical on this early package. So that is potentially not a cost that you would incur. But if, for instance, we need to do some electrical work, some design that needs to be bundled into this early package, we would need to engage our electrical engineer to provide those documents and the early plans and specs. And that's the reason. It's just a completely separate package. Mark, anything you want to add?
Mark, you're muted.
No, I think the big picture here is that we really didn't want to lose the opportunity of having basically a vacant campus this summer. Starting a project like this in mid-year, we'd be probably starting actually the overall project in early November. Would definitely cause some disruption to the way the school operates initially. So the plan here was try to get as much of the enabling work done, any of the temporary parking, any temporary driveway access to the site, our construction fences set, really isolating the entire construction area for the new high school away from the rest of the campus, hauling as much topsoil and materials away from our site that's going to be stockpiled on the opposite side of the site, taking care of that work, really getting the traffic patterns established by the end of the summer, so that when the kids do arrive back in September, they really start off fresh with a new traffic pattern, and they go about their school year. We just really would hate to lose the ability to get this work done this summer when we have that opportunity.
And if I could just add on, the reason why we don't have the construction management cost additionals, because when we prepared our proposal, we were assuming in an early enabling phase. So we did have some monies in there for the summer.
Right. Right.
Michael Smith has his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, just something of a procedural question first. Do you need a motion to support that? Are you hoping to take action on this tonight, or is this just informational?
It's informational at the moment, Michael. I wanted to kind of gauge conversation and where we are, and if we were missing critical information. This is a super important conversation. Right now, we weren't kind of sure where we're headed. We can always amend.
Sure.
You know,
if you want to raise a motion, then we'll do that.
Right.
I'll just share my support for the early enabling package and an understanding of the costs associated for why you what that cost is and why there is a piece that is additive, not just simply shifting the cost earlier. So that's number one. At some point in time, I think it would be helpful to revisit the topic that came up when this was previously introduced at the subcommittee level. There was some question about what portion of this 106,000 may relate to additional design work or electrical work for planning associated with how involved the scope of work becomes with respect to temporary parking. And so I don't know if our intention is to sort of cover that as a topic and be able to identify what portion of this 106,000 may relate to additional planning dollars associated with considering what is the scope of work for that temporary parking. But if you're looking to gauge where people are at, I support the early enabling package with the understanding that 106,000 would be the upper limit, and that there may be a portion of this, if the scope of parking were to change, that could potentially come down.
Rich, you want to? Yeah, I was going to say, you want to
Yes.
provide clarification on the parking
Sure.
piece? Yeah.
I'd be happy to, yes. So this question did come up during one of the working sessions. I did go back to our site engineers and I asked that same question. I said, is there a difference in your design effort or construction administration effort, should that be required, if we change the level of finish, if you will, or the level of completeness of the temporary parking lot? And specifically, I believe we talked about whether we pave it or whether we leave it as a gravel lot. And the response I got from the site engineers, look, in either case, they have to do a regrading plan. They need to also prepare a drainage strategy, regardless of whether it's gravel or if it's paved. And so consequently, and we have to do a layout that shows how many parking spaces that can fit in the temporary area. So the answer that I got from our site engineers, it's an insignificant difference in cost of one versus the other. And so they were not willing to change or offer a difference in fee savings by going to, let's say, a gravel lot as opposed to a paved lot.
So this 106,000 is just for design, doesn't include construction, right?
It's for design and it's for administrative work, construction administration during construction by the design team. But
it
it's
has
not,
no construction cost.
no.
That's correct.
Mark, I believe, already has included in that budget that just we reviewed, the cost of that construction is already built in.
Correct. All the temporary measures, basically all the enabling work is included in the overall construction estimate that we presented previously. So.
So the additional 106,000 is just to do it early.
I think I lost that last word, but it's, yes,
Early.
it's just,
So the 106,000 is just because it's an enabling project. Otherwise, if this was going to be done the following summer, there wouldn't be an additional design fee.
This is not the following summer. This would be work that would be
I
occurring.
understand that,
Yeah.
Laura. I'm saying if this was to go the summer after of 2023, say, this design fee would be included in the overall design costs.
no, that's not correct. If we're required to do the layouts, it would be part of the design cost, as opposed to having, let's say, a contractor do the layouts, a design build approach. Let's say you tell a subcontractor, you do the layouts, we just need a temporary lot, figure it out. Then it's not our burden, it becomes the contractor's burden.
So we didn't plan on having a temporary parking lot as part of the project. This is completely new.
We didn't plan on an early package to be designed.
I understand. I understand that, Richard. My point is, if this wasn't going early as an enabling project, this would be included with the overall cost of the project.
So it depends on who does the layout and who does the design work. If it's done
Okay,
by,
I guess I have to ask the wrong question to get the right answer. Do we have in the project, did you plan on having a temporary parking lot, regardless of it being an enabling project or included with the overall project?
I did not include in my original design fee, the design for a temporary parking lot.
Thank you. So I guess what were we going to do? How are we going to accommodate the parking when we eliminate it during construction? What was the plan? Excuse me.
If you look at the pre-referendum layouts, we did have an area designated, but it was not carefully planned out because temporary parking lots and early enabling improvements are typically handled by construction companies. We don't do temporary things. We design permanent improvements to the site. Any kind of temporary measures that are put in to get the permanent building built is not typically handled by the design team.
If I can jump in here, some of my questions have been answered, so a couple others. You stated that we don't need a decision tonight, but obviously it's looming. Do you guys have a date of when you would need a decision by so that you could facilitate it with an approval?
Honestly, I had hoped this would be on the agenda at an earlier committee meeting. It just didn't happen. Now we're really up against the wall. We're planning to submit to planning and zoning. If this is going to be a separate bid package that the state reviews, they will want to see approval by planning and zoning for this package. And without that approval, we're potentially not going to get this early package approved by the state in a timely way. I can't remember the exact date that Laurel has for what's called a PCR date for the early package, but that's what's really the critical date. I mean, if we can't get to the state, and the state will require planning and zoning approval of whatever is shown on those plans, that's in jeopardy.
Right.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I just wanted to say, I think it's important to note that we've gone through a few iterations of this with Richard and his consultants in terms of where we started with the numbers to where we are today. Also within this, the site construction and administration, that 21,000, we've asked the consultants to consider that as a as needed basis. And so given the fact of the work that it is temporary work, and that we have an abundance of confidence in O&G in their abilities to oversee the temporary work. There will be some need for our consultants to come out and review the work, but don't expect, and we hope that we won't be spending all of that 21,000. The potential additional costs, the electrical design and electrical construction admin, we also asked as sort of an allowance that if we need it, we would spend it. So again, that's your net max estimate. I think some of the things that escalated the need for design around this were the intricacies of traffic patterns, bus loops, how we were going to manage that, and sort of what we started the discussions, we started talking about what would really be needed or required for a temporary lot. The Russ, you're absolutely right. I think that, you know, there is some of this cost in here that's, whether it's early or not, that would be required. And so that, you know, that should be noted in part of our discussions tonight. But Richard has expressed the concern for making a date without or missing our date without getting some sort of a decision to move forward. The state, we had an opportunity in our last meeting with the state to sort of pass this by them, ask for their input on our early enabling package, and some of the assumptions at the top came from that meeting. But one of the other things we sort of talked about was what would be eligible or ineligible. And we're working with the state to see if we can't get some of these temporary provisions to actually be eligible, because they're really needed to accommodate the footprint of the building. So hoping to recoup you know, some of those costs, you know, while working with the state to get some of these things reimbursed.
Okay. How, and I know this was asked at the working group meeting, and I'm not sure I got a clear answer, but did you guys calculate what the overall student parking was? What's the loss due to the construction of the school? And then what's the size of the lot that we're adding, and do those equal? And then I guess the second part is for more of the Board of Ed, is there an opportunity to limit some of that, maybe not all of it, but some of that, just from a function that everybody's being inconvenienced at this point for the better good of the town and the students and the school system going forward. And you know, from my eyes, it was a temporary parking area, and it turned into a paved paved area with traffic patterns, potential lights, potential drainage implications, and structures, or something to do with, you know, some kind of swale to slow the sheet flow. And I think it morphed into something much more than I had in mind, and maybe that's just my own naiveness. But do you guys have the numbers on the parking, and is there a way to at least minimize some of the impact? Because the way I see this is all money that we're spending on what we're calling, quote, temporary, that's not being used in the school. And we just spent a bunch of time trying to find, you know, add alternates and VE and all this. You know, are there opportunities to minimize this, or are the numbers at least equaling up at this point?
This is Laurel. There's 125 parking spots that's going to be lost due to construction and revised traffic patterns. So there's 125 spaces that will be taken offline. And the parking lot cost that we've included is for 130, just because the costing was occurring before the finalization of the numbers lost. But we're providing for 130 spaces, and that's what's in our cost right now for the temporary lot. And it's up to somebody, the school, to determine if we in fact need that many parking spaces. Obviously, we'll build whatever's required, but it was supposed to be an equivalency at that point.
Thank you, Laurel. So I think I just want to add to Johnny to the fact that, you know, we would handle that as a V. So depending on what scope of work we decide for that parking lot, could certainly be, right now, what's carried in the budget is you know, are the things that you just talked about in terms of carrying dollars for the paved lot. And you know, there are saving opportunities as you reduce the the scope of the lot. And that could be looked at in terms, from additional VE items. And but Richard alluded to the fact that whether, dependent, no matter how you, what you end up with a lot, the design fees, are the design fees. So that's at least my understanding in terms of what we're looking at moving forward tonight.
And I don't know, maybe the Board of Ed can jump in as far as, obviously there's always a lack of parking. So I'm only asking the question because I think it's due diligence at this point, but is there any space to minimize the parking lot from a day-to-day operation?
I just heard how many spots. So, we're losing up at the high school, and that those spots will be made up in the temporary parking lot. We of course would look at what the cost benefit would be if we were to reduce it by 30 spots. What's the cost benefit? Because if it really isn't that much money, it would not really make sense to take spots away, knowing that this is not just for the school day. This is for events, sporting, music events, the use of that school by the community during construction. So, I really would need to know, if we took this many away, what would that mean? And that to me is a conversation probably that we would have to have separate from this meeting.
Yeah,
Okay. And then sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, the only other piece to consider again with this is the uptick in traffic over the last several years and lack of bus riders and things like that. But there's high demand. We're going to fill the spots that are there. Obviously, I think Kathy brings a good point, which is for the team to look at what is the cost benefit of a reduction. But there is an expectation in terms of our community that that our juniors and seniors have access to parking as well. And as Kathy mentioned, several of the events that will take place as well over the next several years. We're probably looking at 3 years of use out of that. But again, I think that's something we could look at to see if there's any benefit to reducing that.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, has any thought been put in, because I heard maybe after school events and things like that, which is probably the reason the lighting is being included, but the access to the school from this parking lot is either walking back through the library and up the hill or utilizing a set of stairs that's currently closed during the winter, ADA, everything else that could bring into the scope. Has that been looked at all?
We just included a sidewalk that went from the lot to connect to the other pedestrian path. So that's what the assumption is right now that's in the cost.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So last comment, just so I understand that you guys are in a position that you're trying to include the costs, but you haven't really defined an actual scope of exactly what's got to get done. And you're asking the committee for sort of a design fee approval out of contingency for we don't know what the actual outcome is. So that it's putting us in a little difficult position. So I apologize for all the questions.
Let me just, this is my kind of a clarifying question, just to make sure we're all clear on kind of decision points here. So let's say, just for discussion's sake, that we make a decision as committee tonight not to move forward with early enabling. I understand based on that decision, we would obviously lose the benefits we have listed here. The risk, as we've stated, goes away. Do all the costs go away as well?
Meg, the construction cost will remain, right? The work that we've outlined in the enabling package really is work that has to take place, right? So it's just a matter of when we do it. So it's really up to Richard at that point. Is there design cost that would be associated with the work that we've shown on the enabling package that is not covered under his basic service contract?
Correct. So based on the cost we're looking at right here on our screen, do all those costs go away, or we're still carrying a cost no matter what we do?
So design fees for temporary improvements would not go away if we were asked to do those the design of those temporary improvements.
I'm confused, Richard. Are you saying the temporary improvements meaning improvements to the scope of the temporary parking lot?
No, I mean, if we're to do a bid package for the temporary parking and the site enabling features, that's a design fee that would have to be tacked on to our basic fee.
But I'm confused, because if that happens through the natural course of things, that was already part of the scope and should be, am I misunderstanding that if the scope of work that has been approved is for you to design a additional parking lot that's used during construction, that's included in your fees, and that what we're talking about here is not associated with that? When I'm looking at the 106,000, what we're talking about is advancing that work and doing it separate from the bigger body of work. That's my understanding. Am I wrong?
You're partially right.
Okay.
And partially wrong.
Okay.
So the fact is that the design of temporary improvements was never part of our original scope. And it's come about because ONG asked us to do the temporary improvements. So we don't have to be the firm that does it. It could be somebody else that does it. That's included in ONG's costs.
Can you be specific of what a temporary improvement is? Because that part I'm getting lost on.
So I think it's best, and that's one of the reasons we have schematic design as part of this fee proposal for the temporary improvements. I'm not entirely clear of all of the scope that ONG has in mind for temporary improvements. If it includes things like construction fencing, if it includes things like access drives, those are clearly temporary items that will be removed. And that's not typically done by a design firm that's hired to do the permanent improvements. So I would ask ONG if they could define, which we will flesh out during schematic design of this early package, if they could define this evening some examples of what they envision being part of this.
This is Laurel. I can share my screen with that pictorial if that will help as well, to remind everybody what we were talking about with what the work was. So let's just make sure I got it up. Share. Can everybody see this, my screen?
Yes, Laurel.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, just to kind of reiterate, what we were envisioning doing was, again, constructing this temporary lot with some sort of an access to get to the existing sidewalk that's along the side of the school. We were going to look to do this grading, this rough grading and temporary bituminous drive here to allow for our construction access with signage. We were going to go ahead and put all our temporary fencing up and start stripping the topsoil. And as Mark had mentioned, we will be able to store some within our staging area, but chances are we will be also hauling and putting it where it's going to be needed in the end, which is where the fields will go. So that heavy equipment movement wants to be done when there's no, ideally when there's no students in school traffic. One of the costs that I foresee needing the design for from a temporary standpoint is the traffic flow, because we're going to be interrupting the way that the existing drop-off works. We really needed somebody that does traffic design to make sure that once we've cordoned off this portion of the parking lot, how is that new traffic flow going to work? We were aware that the buses were going to continue to operate as they do now, but how is that traffic flow going to work? So in that 106, I believe, is the engineering that's required for figuring out how we don't, how everything can move smoothly with the queuing. So that should be in there. If this was just a pure lot and we just showed this to a contractor and said, give me a lot, what the contractor would do is probably do some sort of rough grading, put in some asphalt. Now, if that's what's acceptable to the town, and if the town's not going to require any sort of storm drainage calculations or curbs, or, if the town isn't going to require anything from approval standpoint, then there doesn't really need to be a design for it. But if the town's going to be requiring some sort of design effort to look at in order to be able to approve this going forward, then that's where the design team is needed to provide those services.
So a follow-up question I have is the discussion that's happening tonight saying that as TKSP put in their original estimate to do all work, is that there was never envisioned this dogleg right that you've got for flow of parking and a construction of a temporary lot? That was not part of the scope of services you were bidding on?
No, it was not.
Okay,
And
that's what I needed to know. And then so I am understanding that whether we do it now or we do it later, somebody has to design that stuff if a design is required by a designer on your team.
Precisely.
Follow-up question is, are you the right people to be doing that? This looks like site work. Would this be SLR that would do this?
It could be any qualified person. It doesn't have to be our design team members. So when Laurel said that the design team needs to do it, it's not I don't believe it has to be our design team. A design team that could be retained by O&G can certainly do it.
Gotcha.
So SLR did provide, so it's Richard's got a piece of the oversight, but it's his landscape design firm. So Richter Segan and then SLR on the engineering piece that provided.
Okay, so that's part of that 60 whatever that we were looking at.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So my apologies, because I am clearly understanding now that this is a scope of work. It's not a when does it happen, but it is a total scope of work that was not in the original package.
Correct. And I would like to add that you don't necessarily have to do it through us. You can hire.
Well, that is what as you are describing what this is related to, I'm left with the question of why not simply have the site engineers do this work?
I agree.
I don't think the architects need to be involved.
I agree.
So if it was included in the early enabling package, TSKP takes the lead with the portion to the state, unless I'm wrong.
Right,
with
just there's some additional filing costs associated of doing two filings versus one. I get that, but to the questions that were raised earlier by Russ and by others, I'm now coming to understand that it sounds like whether you do this now or you do it later, unless somebody's just going out there with a bulldozer and trying to create a parking lot, you need a site plan from somebody that's designing what that parking lot's going to look like and how that dogleg right changes. And that's going to be a cost incurred either as part of early enabling or later. This is not entirely just related to early enabling.
Correct.
Do we have a sense of what that, do you have the SLR bid that you can share with us what portion that is? Because to me, that's what you got to pay, whether you pay it now or later.
You want me to stop sharing because I think that was in the packet, but maybe not.
It is.
Yeah, it's in the agenda.
Yeah, it is in the packet.
In the meantime, Chris, I know you had your hand up, Chris Fagan.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of this stuff has been answered, and Laurel, I was going to ask you if you still had that picture so I could put this all back in perspective, but I mean, maybe I'm missing stuff here, but I guess, in doing what I do for a living and I present large cases to senior management, one of the questions they always ask me, why are we hearing about this now? And it strikes me as this should have been baked into somewhere along the lines. I mean, maybe I'm just missing it. I mean, I understand the merits of it, and I think it's great to do it during the summer, but it just seems odd that this is coming out sort of with an additional $100,000 ticket attached to it.
If I could answer that, we were never asked to design any type of temporary features until we were asked to do that by O&G. And that typically isn't done by the design firm.
So as you can see, SLR provided TSKP a number of $27,000. A lot of this pertains to the arrangement for the temporary lot. That's why they did include a piece of schematic design and design development. And then final construction documents, they would participate in the bidding and award of this. And then we've asked them to carry sort of an hourly budget for construction administration and closeout as needed. So that's one piece of it. If you could scroll down to Richter Segan. This is for landscape design. So Richter Segan is providing 3 drawings as part of this. But they would look at the stripping the topsoil, constructing the temporary lot, constructing the access road and reconfiguration of the drop-off flow, construct staging areas with perimeter fencing and gates, and construct temporary pedestrian paths, possible site utility relocations, and install permanent property boundary buffers. So the fencing, landscaping, etc. Could you scroll down a little bit more for their fee, or was that up above? Let's see.
Is that included in the 27,000 mark?
So
No,
no,
that's additional.
SLR is 29,000 and Richter Segan is, I can't, is that
That's 40,900.
40,900. So if you go back up to TSKP's original numbers, you'll see that they have included a, if you scroll all the way up, a few more pages. Right there. Yeah, right there. So the civil engineering, so we had asked them to go back and break out the construction administration piece that we would be tracking on a sort of time and material type thing. So the design fee is 22,000. Their construction administration would be 7,000, and there'd be a total budget of 30,000. The landscape design, their design fee was 32,500. So sorry, and so the first number is that letter A under that column is all the design fees. There's a 10% markup for TSKP to manage them. And carry the sort of under their contracts, just like we did with the ad services, for example, the theater, the group that's doing the theater consultant and the food consultant, TSKP was awarded a 10% markup for those contracts. And then so we asked that we pull that out, separate it, and then they've included $10,000 for coordination and construction administration. So their fee is 15,000 on top of everything else. So that's kind of where you get, if you look at that first design fee and markup in column B, that's that $68,000 number. The 21,000 in column D, that's on a as needed sort of an allowance that we would be carrying to spend down whether or not we needed SLR to come out to the site to answer questions or respond to an RFI or something to that effect. If you scroll down further, the MEP engineers, so TSKP felt it was prudent to carry an allowance for Kohler Ronin should we need some sort of temporary electrical provisions with the site, whether or not we wanted site lighting or something to that effect. We did have conversations as a group to talk about just lighting stanchions, the gas operated, you run them at night and you turn them off during the day, sort of a temporary and not have any sort of real design around that. And then so their totals are, for the budget, again, those are allowances, 16,500 for allowances to be carried. So it's the 68,000 hard costs, the 21,000 as an allowance for construction administration, and then 16.5. And that's made up of basically SLR's cost, Richter Segan's cost, and TSAP's coordination fees. So is the question, could somebody else hire SLR and Richter Segan to do the work and pull TSKP out of the scope? That answer.
Yes, that's my question. Yeah.
And then, you know,
so I have a two-part question. I guess one would, to me, that's becoming obvious. This is site work. And the other piece is that I think it may be worth getting your input, Mark, on the concept that the landscape design component of this is greater than the site engineering work. It's temporary parking. I'm shocked that as you go through the breakout of this, there's that much in landscape design for a parking lot that the site engineer can create with there being no landscape architect in the room.
If I can, Mike, I think that's the whole package, and it goes over some of the things that Laurel said. It coordinates the traffic patterns. It coordinates the whole job and integrates it as part of the enabling project with their work that they got to get ready for, and they're stockpiling, getting traffic in and out of the high school during school once this is up and running. But I could be way off base with that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see more detail of the landscape design piece. Some of those things I totally agree with Russ, but it just seems high. And it also seems to me that it is becoming more clear that whether you do this now in those summer months, prepare for the summer months, or you do it later, we're going to incur these fees. And I wonder if someone could revisit the clarity of that answer.
So to segregate that out, you know, I think what we haven't really been able to identify is, I mean, other than the fact that there's a couple $1,000s in each quote to go for bidding, you know, as part of the separate package, I think that, and, you know, Richard, I would ask for your input on this, that if we were to pull, if this were to go later, it would bid all as one package, and there wouldn't be additional costs for bidding from SLR and from Richter Segan. So those numbers could probably come out.
Right. So you could reduce the round of bidding responses to bidders' questions. You could reduce the that kind of burden. You could also reduce the additional review by the state. That is certainly possible if this were bundled with the big project. But you would, if O&G is looking for phasing diagrams to be included in the big project, somebody's got to do it. So O&G can retain someone to do phasing diagrams, or you could have us do it if this is something that you want to have done as part of the bundle. That's really the crux of it, who you ask to do it.
And if I look at what you're talking about in the breakout, and you'd have to go back to the section that breaks out SLR's work in awarding the bid. I think there was like $2,000 in selecting who does that.
Correct.
Right? Am I missing where the?
It's $2,000 for, yeah. But also there's bidding under Richter Segan too.
Right. So what I'm saying is that's a pretty small amount in trying to do separate bids. It seems to me that the majority of this cost is a cost that will be incurred early on or later. So I'm I think I was left the impression that the majority of these costs were in bringing the professionals on board to do a separate scope of work that would require them to duplicate effort. And the duplication of effort might be $2,000 in SLR, maybe 2,000 in Richter Segan. I don't know that they break it out. I'm just estimating. So it seems to me that this is a scope of work that needs to get done, and whether you do it early or not, you got to pay somebody to do it, correct? And what I'm trying to figure out is that 80% of this total cost, or is it 20%? And I don't know that it would help to get clarity on that answer.
I would think that the design work is a big portion of this. I think that, Laurel made a statement tonight saying, if the town isn't going to require a designed lot, if we can just go in there and ask the site guy to bulldoze it out and identify whether or not it's going to be paving or if it's just going to be a gravel lot, and everybody's okay with that. I think that that's, where you could reduce some of your costs. I do think, to Russ's point, the landscape design, that there's a big piece of that's going to be required, especially with the sensitivity around traffic flow and everything else.
First of all, I think we got a couple questions here. I don't think as a committee, and anybody else can jump in on this, is that, if the decision we need, or decision we need to make in order to move the schedule forward is, do we do an early enablement package or not? I think as a committee, we need to understand the cost associated to only that decision. And I don't think we're clear on that. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me. Because I think what we heard tonight is there's costs no matter what, which is a whole nother conversation we need to have, is like, okay, there's additional costs we're going to need to account for that we haven't accounted for before, but they're not necessarily associated to going early, which is the question we need to answer in order to make sure we maintain schedule. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's what it sounds like to me.
So I don't think as a committee, first of all, Laura, we need to know from our perspective, if we don't make this decision tonight, let's say we make it at our next meeting, does it automatically blow our possibility of doing an early enablement package out of the water? I guess that's between, that's a general question on scheduling. So, because I don't feel like, based on our conversation tonight, we have the information we need to make that a confident decision around this yet.
We've allowed in our schedule 1 month between now and February 22nd to get through the schematic design and the design development process to start construction documents. So we've got 1 month to get through schematic design and through design development before construction documents could get started in order to meet our schedule. And again, it has to be vetted out with what size lot do we need to provide. Those questions need to be asked and answered. So we're looking for a green light to start that conversation in order to, that conversation needs to happen anyhow.
Right.
But to February 22nd, they've got to be able to start doing construction documents. And in order to be starting that, they have to have gone through these other prior design processes. So, and I have it backed up on my schedule. I think I have it starting in July. So there's no real wiggle room in the schedule.
Meaning if we push this decision to our next meeting, which is the 2nd.
Correct. Because as Richard had mentioned also from Taisu Kim, that they need the site plan approval. They need to start that application on February 22nd or 23rd, somewhere in that time frame. So the 3 weeks isn't going to be enough time for them to be prepared to go for that site plan approval. And I'm speaking on behalf of Taisu Kim. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but
to go to the state. Yeah.
I have a suggestion. If the committee will allow a fee increase to go only schematic design and design development by SLR and Richter and Segan, so that we can get those documents bundled in with our site plan application for planning and zoning, that will get us a long way, and we will not lose this precious few weeks. We need to get something before the town planner to say, here's what we're going to be doing. And if then the decision is not to proceed with construction documents, you can make that decision later.
Richard, I have to say that you literally stole my thunder. I was going to say the exact same thing. Is this a possibility? If that's the possibility, I think we've gone round and round. There's still a couple of questions, but if this helps at a very minimal amount, at least get the process rolling, we get a little more answers, even a schematic design in 2 weeks, we'll have a better idea of what we're dealing with. If that's I'm all in if that's a possibility.
That's a possibility.
And just some quick math on that. I'm getting it would come to the amount of $22,200 between SLR and Richter Segan. So someone check my math.
So I have 9,500 for SLR.
Yep.
$12,700 for Richter Segan.
So 22,200.
Right.
And that's not lost work, meaning that, if we make a decision later on, that's still valuable effort.
Right. And I was just going to say that, Meg, it seems like the schematic design, let's say we did a 180 and we went a completely different route. It's not a wasted work on our end. It's still a schematic design that, whether it's built by the group that we're with or somebody else at that point, I think it's all useful information. I would add that maybe you can ask Richter Segan for a maybe a senior citizen discount on that schematic design, and then I'm all in. I'm all in.
We kind of did that already. We did get a revised pricing for both of them. Just throwing that out there. These numbers were higher prior to the presentation.
And this 22,200 is something that we would incur regardless, correct? So we would have to spend this money anyway to get this design.
If we were going to utilize SLR and Richter Segan, the numbers could be higher or lower with another consultant. So to Richard's point, anybody could do this. Any qualified, firm could do it, but it would be, it makes sense to use the team that's already in place. So the short answer is yes.
I know this may not sound popular, but I have to tell you, I've just recently been through a bid on a similar thing of just setting up a parking lot, and I got it from SLR, and it actually comes in quite comparable to what you've got here. And I do think that there are some things that we could potentially asterisk that could be managed by other people. The part that I'm really having a hard time accepting is the landscaping things. There are things that are in that, my quick look at it, that we will need to get done. But I've been able to accomplish that in working with SLR to do that as well. So I've forwarded that to you, Mark, and to Meg to take a look at. So I don't want to say like, I'm just making this stuff out of my head. I'm saying I in working with the exact same companies in virtually the exact same scope of work, I'm seeing fees that are less. And so appreciating that you've said people have put pencil to paper, but I think there's more work and we need to examine the scope. But I will still go back to where I originally started this. I think we need to move this forward. I just don't think we have the right scope and clarity on who's going to handle all these pieces. But if we're putting in a parking lot and the costs that are being carried for the one that's in the scope of work with O&G, it's got to be designed. And I would support that SLR is the designer of that. And I'm going to raise the question that I like the other firm. They do great work, but I don't know that we need that scope of what we're already recognizing is we can pull TSKP out of this. And I'm raising the question as to whether or not you can also pull parts of what Richter Segan has in here and make it all an SLR package and not be duplicating effort. But these guys know how to make a parking lot independent of Richter Segan because they're doing it.
I don't have the experience with SLR, so I don't know, Richard, how you feel about that?
So
So SLR's strength is in engineering. So look at their proposal carefully because they are excluding grading design. They're anticipating someone else would actually do the grading, and then they would do the storm calculations based upon that grading. So if you want to ask SLR to be responsible for also the grading required for the temporary lot, then that 9,500 that we just quickly calculated will probably be greater, will probably be increased. They're excluding electrical, they're excluding a number of things. So that 9,500, so SLR could handle it. They don't need to have Richter and Segan advise them, but I think that 9,500 we just talked about probably will need to be adjusted by SLR.
If they do it, you're saying?
If they do it.
If they take over, take it over.
Right, if they do it.
Okay. It sounds to me like this modified approach makes a lot of sense to us, that as long as we're investing in work that's not, that's of value to us, at that 22,000-ish estimate, and looking at that as a maximum before we have to reassess our costs there. Is that something that the committee is willing to entertain as far as a vote tonight in order to move us forward from a timeline perspective? So it would be that modified cost to start the process, do more work with Richter Segan and SLR, understand what's included there, and kind of so that we're not losing any time, and then we can reevaluate from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do you want to make it a not to exceed number, just so that it's clear that we're putting something down, and then if the group determines that in their, all the professionals working on this say that the scope and the cost might exceed the number that we put, then come back to us immediately. Right. But I'm comfortable saying I think this is a good idea to mobilize early, and if we put some limitations on the cost, I'd be comfortable supporting a motion like that.
Same here.
Anybody else have any thoughts before? I know this was a lot of conversation. I appreciate everybody staying with us on this. This is something, as you've noticed, we've been talking about, but as we really dig into it and understand it, and I think this is kind of also shows the level of commitment that we have around this obligation of budget towards this project with the community, and making understand, we really understand if we're touching dollars, especially from contingency, that we understand what's included. So I appreciate the professional partners walking us through this as well. But if nobody has any questions at this point, I think we have kind of some thoughts on a motion to put forward based on this modified approach. Anything before we do that? Nope. Okay. All right. So based on that conversation, and we know that there's additional work that's going to need to be done, I would like to ask for a motion to accept the quotes from SLR and Richter Segan for schematic design and design development per their January 22 estimates, not to exceed $22,200.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second. Give it to Chris.
I even hate to ask, is there any more discussion? We've had a lot.
None.
And just Laurel, just making sure this is going to, and Richard, this is going to give you guys what you need to at least start the process. And then obviously we know that we're going to have some more conversation around it.
As long as Richard's committed to starting on February 22nd with the construction documents, I'm good.
Yes. Assuming that the committee authorizes to do construction documents. Right now, we have authorization for schematic and DD, which is maintaining our schedule, which is good. Yes, this is enough for us to get going.
Perfect. All right, excellent. All right, so if there's no other discussion, we will go ahead and vote. So all in favor of the motion as stated?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent. So the motion passes unanimously. All right. That was a good one, guys. That was a lot of, lot of conversation. But again, as I said, I do appreciate it. I know this is tough to get through some of this stuff, but I think it makes a difference that we really understand, what we're trying to get to. So thank you very much to everybody for that, for providing detail. But more to come. We'll continue the conversation and get some more detail around it. Okay, so we're going to move right on to our next item on the agenda. And this is a motion to move to executive session. Correct, Kat? Am I right in my?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, sorry. There was a lot of time in between, so I had to make sure I'm on target here. So a motion to move to executive session, and this is in a review and discussion of RFP responses for commissioning services in accordance with the stated Connecticut general statutes.
Yeah, list the attendees.
Yeah, I was going to do it during discussion, but I can do it now, Johnny. So executive session to review and discuss RFP responses for commissioning services. The attendees will include voting and non-voting members of the Farmington High School Building Committee, representatives from TSKP, representatives from CSG, and representatives from O&G.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
And just a note for everybody, you received a separate link for the executive session. So it's a separate Zoom meeting. We do keep this Zoom meeting running because we'll go into executive session on a different Zoom, complete that, and then everybody will come back onto this Zoom so that we can do the final two motions, which is to select the final candidate and to authorize the town manager and professional partnership subcommittee. So a little confusing, a little bit of musical chairs, but we will hop off this meeting, keep it running, and join the executive session meeting. So that was in your email.
So Kat, how do we execute on this? Do we mute and stop video? We keep it open or rejoin?
Devin will keep this meeting running. Everybody will be off, but he will stay on with this message at the top. So the stream will continue. Attendees can remain on here. All of us will go off, go on the separate Zoom, and then we're all able to rejoin this meeting. So this meeting doesn't end, it continues.
But we leave here, officially hit the leave button, start the new, go to the new link, leave there, and then come back to this one.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
We haven't done these virtual ones in a while, so we're gonna stick a laptop in another office and keep the meeting running.
All right, so we will see everybody in the executive session link in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Hey Laurel, did you receive the Zoom link for the
You know
executive
what
session?
I did? I thought I did, and I definitely canceled. I by accident deleted the invite to the executive. So I was
Okay.
trying to find it in my email, and I clicked on this one first.
Okay, I'll resend it to you. Give me one
Okay.
second.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm still in. No, I know. Okay.
I think we're just missing Meg, the most important one. I think we're good, Meg, when you're ready.
Sorry about that. I was having connection issues. I don't know what was going on there. Okay, so coming out of executive session, I would like to ask for a motion to table agenda items G8 and G9.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this? So we anticipate this going back on the agenda for our next building committee meeting. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion is unanimously approved. And I believe that was the end of our agenda for this evening. So can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion on that this evening? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, unanimously approved. We will adjourn at 8:04.